Empires rarely fall on the battlefield. Their true destruction comes when their money turns worthless, just like Rome's silver melted away, or Spain went bankrupt holding half the world's silver. This seven-stage collapse pattern broke the greatest empires in history. Today, America faces record debt and an unraveling dollar. Is the endgame already underway, or do we still have time? Nero's reign brought a subtle but devastating change to Rome's money. The denarius, once trusted across the empire for its purity, began to lose its silver. At first, the difference was almost invisible. Nero lowered the silver content from pure to just 90%, but the process did not stop. Over the next 2 centuries, emperors facing endless wars and extravagant spending kept stretching the coin's metal thinner. By the time of Caracalla in 211 AD, the denarius was only half silver. Under Gallienus, around 265 AD, less than 5% silver remained. What looked like money was mostly copper, washed with a thin layer of silver that wore away with use. Assay records confirm the decline, from 4.5 grams of silver at Rome's peak down to a trace. Pay scrolls from the frontiers reveal the real cost. Soldiers who once earned a solid wage in silver now found their pay nearly worthless. By the late 3rd century, a legionary's salary bought just 1/8, sometimes as little as 1/12 of what it had 2 centuries before. Letters from the Rhine and Danube borders show soldiers begging for gold or goods instead of foul money. Inflation took hold. A denarius that could buy a sheep in 200 AD could barely buy a loaf of bread by 300 AD. The price of staples rose at least 50 times. Farmers refused coins, demanding barter. Tax collectors struggled as citizens hid their wealth or demanded payment in kind. The empire's backbone and its military and bureaucracy it crumbled as no one trusted the currency. Debasement meant to buy time, instead destroyed the system from within. Silver flood. Cerro Rico in Potosi, discovered in 1545, unleashed a torrent of silver unlike anything the world had seen. Spanish galleons hauled tons of bullion across the Atlantic, fueling a global currency, the Spanish dollar that passed from Manila to Amsterdam. For a century, half the world's silver poured from this mountain into Spain's coffers. On paper, Spain was the richest power on earth, but as silver flooded in, prices across Europe soared. What bought 1 loaf of bread in 1500 needed 10 coins by 1600. Economic historians trace this price revolution directly to the new money supply. Spain became a conduit. Silver arrived, but so did luxury imports, foreign mercenaries, and endless war expenses. The empire built no industry, produced little, and relied entirely on colonial wealth. Debt defaults. King Philip II inherited debts of 36 million ducats, over 5 times the crown's annual income. Instead of cutting costs, he borrowed more, relying on Genoese bankers and promising future silver shipments. When war and spending overwhelmed the treasury, Spain defaulted in 1557. The royal decree suspended payments to creditors. Panic spread through Europe's financial centers. Trust evaporated. Spain defaulted again in 1560, 1575, and 1596. Each time, lenders demanded harsher terms or refused loans outright. The government responded by minting copper coins called vellon and claiming they were equal to silver. Merchants and soldiers rejected them. Armies in Flanders mutinied, suppliers abandoned contracts, and the empire's military machine stalled. By the early 1600s, Spain's currency had lost credibility at home and abroad. The world's richest silver supply had become a trap, feeding inflation, default, and decline. Britain entered the 20th century as the world's banker, with the pound sterling trusted from Shanghai to Buenos Aires. The gold sovereign guaranteed that every paper note could be redeemed for real metal, anchoring global trade and finance. But the First World War shattered that foundation almost overnight. National debt ballooned from £650 million in 1914 to over £7 billion by 1919, a tenfold leap in just 5 years. The Bank of England printed money to fund the war, suspending gold convertibility and flooding the economy with unbacked notes. After the armistice, policymakers faced a dilemma: restore the pound's old gold value or accept a diminished role in the world. Winston Churchill, then Chancellor of the Exchequer, insisted on returning sterling to its pre-war gold parity in 1925. Cabinet minutes and Churchill's own memoirs reveal the pressure to project strength and stability. But the numbers told a different story. Domestic prices and wages had risen by more than 10% compared to pre-war levels, while the pound was fixed at its old rate. This made British exports instantly uncompetitive. Factories closed, unemployment soared, and the coal, steel, and textile industries, once the empire's backbone, entered a long decline. John Maynard Keynes, in his biting critiques, warned that Churchill's decision was a colossal blunder, locking Britain into deflation and stagnation. The system could not hold. By September 1931, after a run on the pound and a hemorrhage of gold reserves, Britain abandoned the gold standard for good. The pound was devalued, trust eroded, and sterling's status as the world's reserve currency began its long retreat. By the end of the Second World War, Britain's debt had soared to 270% of GDP. The empire's financial power was spent, and the world looked elsewhere for monetary leadership. Richard Nixon faced a crisis of confidence in August 1971. The United States had promised every dollar could be exchanged for gold at $35 an ounce, but the vaults at Fort Knox were being drained by foreign governments demanding gold instead of paper. Nixon's televised announcement closed the gold window, ending the last link between the dollar and any physical standard. Overnight, the world's reserve currency became a matter of faith, backed only by the credit of the United States government. Debt, once measured in billions, began to multiply. In 1980, federal debt stood at $900 billion. By 2000, it had climbed to $5.6 trillion. 20 years later, it passed $27 trillion, and by 2025, it is projected to exceed $36 trillion. The Federal Reserve's response to every crisis, whether a market crash or a global pandemic, has been to create money electronically. During the COVID emergency, over $4 trillion was injected into the system in just 2 years, more than the entire previous century combined. Policymakers insisted this would not unleash inflation, but by 2022, consumer prices had jumped 9%, and the cost of essentials like food, housing, and healthcare surged even higher. The world's central banks have taken notice. At the turn of the millennium, nearly 70% of global reserves were held in dollars. Today, that share has fallen to 58%, according to IMF data. BRICS nations and others are building alternatives, trading in their own currencies and buying gold at the fastest rate in decades. The dollar remains dominant, but the pattern is unmistakable. Trust is eroding, and the world is preparing for what comes next. The same checklist, debt, money creation, inflation, and reserve flight, now applies to the United States. The numbers are public, the trend is clear, and the clock is ticking. Every empire that dominated the world stage followed the same early cycle. It begins with dominance, when money is trusted, often backed by precious metal, and expansion seems limitless. Next comes overextension. The empire grows its military, bureaucracy, and ambitions, spending far beyond what its economy can support. Deficit spending becomes routine. Leaders borrow not for emergencies, but as a way of life. Then comes currency debasement. To cover these chronic deficits, rulers quietly reduce the real value of money by clipping coins, mixing in base metals, or printing unbacked notes. Each of these first 4 stages looks different in Rome, Spain, Britain, and the United States. But the pattern is identical. Trusted money, unchecked expansion, endless borrowing, and the slow, often invisible destruction of currency's real value. Stage 5 is the danger zone, where inflation eats away the real value of money and trust begins to fray. Rome's coins lost their silver, Spain's silver became worthless, Britain's pound slipped from gold, and today the dollar's purchasing power erodes with every printed bill. The next step is harder to reverse. When people and nations start to doubt a currency, they look for exits. Central banks cut their reserves, investors demand higher yields, and households turn wages into gold or foreign cash. Warning signs. Official numbers reveal persistent inflation, a shrinking share of global reserves, and growing demand for alternatives. Confidence breaks. History shows that once confidence breaks, collapse comes quickly. Every empire reached this brink, convinced it could hold the line. Every time, the numbers proved otherwise. Right now, over $36 trillion in United States debt sits atop an aging system the world no longer blindly trusts. As global reserves shift and inflation erodes confidence, history warns, no empire is too exceptional to fail. The final stage always feels unthinkable, until suddenly it's reality.